We're going in a different direction." The words hung in the conference room air like a toxic gas. I sat across from Caleb Vance, the new chief executive officer of Nexora Therapeutics, a man nearly 20 years my junior, who'd been with the company barely 6 months. "Different direction?" I repeated, my voice steadier than I expected. "After 15 years?" Caleb adjusted his designer tie, not quite meeting my eyes. "The board feels the research division needs fresh leadership, someone with innovative approaches." I almost laughed. Innovative approaches. I'd developed Neurovance, the miracle drug that had taken Nexora from a struggling mid-size pharmaceutical company to a biotech powerhouse, generating over $2 billion in annual revenue. My team had pioneered the compound that changed countless lives, and the company's fortunes. "I understand," I said, surprising myself with my calm. "What does the transition look like?" Caleb pushed a thin folder across the polished table. "Your severance package. The legal team has outlined everything. It's standard." I opened it, scanned the numbers, and felt my stomach tighten. Standard? After 15 years and billions in revenue generation, they were offering me 12 weeks of salary and continued health benefits for 3 months. It was insulting, but I didn't let it show. "I see," I said, closing the folder. "When would you like me to finish?" "Today would be best." He had the decency to look slightly uncomfortable. "Human resources can help you pack your office, for security reasons." Security reasons. As if I might suddenly become vindictive and dangerous after 15 years of loyal service. But I simply nodded and stood up. "That won't be necessary. I can clear my desk myself." "Claudia," he said as I reached the door, "this isn't personal. Just business." I turned back and smiled. "Of course, business. My name is Claudia Benson. I'm 51 years old, and until today, I was the Senior Director of Pharmaceutical Research at Nexora Therapeutics in Stamford, Connecticut. I dedicated my life to this company, turned down offers from competitors, worked weekends and holidays, missed family events, all because I believed in what we were doing." As I walked back to my office, colleagues watched me with concerned expressions. News traveled fast. I kept my head high, my face neutral, even as my mind raced. 15 years of innovation, of breakthroughs, of loyalty, ended in a 5-minute meeting. What Caleb Vance didn't know, what the board hadn't bothered to check, was that I had prepared for this possibility months ago. Because when you've been in the pharmaceutical industry as long as I have, you learn to anticipate side effects. It wasn't always like this at Nexora. When I joined the company in 2008, we were a scrappy team of scientists and researchers passionate about neurological treatments. Howard Jameson, the founder and original CEO, created a culture where science came first and business second. "Solve the problems and the profits will follow," he used to say. And he was right. Under his leadership, we developed several moderately successful medications, but nothing revolutionary, until Neurovance. I still remember the night I first saw the promising data. It was nearly midnight, and I was alone in the lab, reviewing test results from our latest trials. The compound showed unprecedented effectiveness in treating treatment-resistant depression with minimal side effects. I called Howard at home, something I'd never done before. "This could change everything," I told him. It did. Neurovance received fast-track approval from the FDA, and within 2 years, it became one of the most prescribed antidepressants in the country. Nexora's stock soared, and suddenly, we weren't the underdogs anymore. We were players. Howard retired 3 years ago, and that's when things began to shift. The board brought in finance people, marketing executives, corporate types who talked about leveraging synergies and maximizing shareholder value. The research team still had respect, but increasingly, decisions were made with quarterly earnings in mind, rather than scientific advancement. Then came Caleb Vance, headhunted from a larger pharmaceutical company, brought in to take Nexora to the next level. I tried to work with him. I really did. I presented our latest breakthrough, an extended release version of Neurovance with even fewer side effects and longer efficacy. Neurovance XR, we called it. Impressive, Caleb had said, but I could see in his eyes that he wasn't fully grasping the scientific significance. How quickly can we get this to market? We need to complete the final trial phases, and then there's the patent process, I explained. Patents. He frowned. Those take too long. Can we expedite? Our legal team has been deliberate, I said carefully. They've been sitting on my paperwork for months. That conversation should have been my warning. The next week, Caleb brought in consultants to evaluate the research division. They asked strange questions, talked about restructuring for efficiency, and made cryptic notes. That's when I called my attorney, Victoria West. Something feels off, I told her. I've developed a compound that could be worth billions, but I'm getting signals that my position isn't secure. Let's talk about options, Victoria said. There are ways to protect yourself and your work. Victoria didn't mince words. Nexora owns your work, she said. Anything you develop as an employee belongs to them. That's standard. I know that, I replied, stirring my coffee. We were meeting at a quiet cafe several towns away from Stamford, away from any prying eyes. But the legal team has been dragging their feet on filing the patent for Neurovance XR. It's been sitting on their desks for months. Victoria looked thoughtful. That's either incompetence or strategy. Neither is good for you. What can I do? Tell me about your employment contract. Any specific clauses about intellectual property? I'd brought a copy, which Victoria reviewed carefully. She stopped at one section, her eyebrow raising slightly. This is interesting, she said. Your contract stipulates that inventions belong to Nexora if they're developed using company resources or during company time. Exactly, I said. It's all theirs. Not necessarily, Victoria replied, tapping the document. Have you done any work on this compound at home? Used your personal equipment? Worked on weekends or after hours when you weren't officially on the clock? I thought back. All the time. I have a home lab set up for theoretical work. I've spent countless weekends and nights refining the molecular structure before bringing it to the official lab. Victoria smiled. And I assume you've documented this? Lab notebooks? Time-stamped computer files? Of course. I'm a scientist. Documentation is second nature. Then we might have something, she said, leaning forward. You could arguably claim that the initial conception and significant development occurred outside company time, using personal resources. But the final testing was at Nexora, yes. But the core intellectual breakthrough, the patent-worthy innovation, you could claim happened on your own time. I was skeptical. Would that hold up? It's not airtight, but it creates a gray area. Enough to file a competing patent application as an individual inventor, Victoria explained. And sometimes, a gray area is all you need to create leverage. The idea felt both exhilarating and terrifying. Wouldn't that be considered unethical? Is it ethical for them to delay filing a patent on your work while possibly planning to remove you? Companies protect themselves all the time. This is you doing the same. After another hour of discussion, we formulated a plan. Victoria would help me establish a personal intellectual property holding company. I would document all my independent work on the compound and file a patent application through my new entity. If Nexora kept me on and properly filed their patent, I would assign my rights to them. If not, well, I'd have insurance. For the next few weeks, I lived a double life. At Nexora, I was the same dedicated research director I'd always been. At home, I meticulously documented my independent contributions to Neurovance XR and prepared the patent filing. The day Victoria confirmed that our application had been submitted to the United States Patent and Trademark Office, I felt a strange mixture of relief and guilt. I told myself it was just protection, a safety net I would hopefully never need to use. 1 week later, I was called into that fateful meeting with Caleb Vance. I cleared out my office with methodical precision. Years of research, awards, and achievements reduced to 3 cardboard boxes. My team members came by, one by one, shocked and upset. "This is ridiculous," said James, my senior researcher. "Without you, there is no Nexora." "You'll be fine," I assured him, though I wasn't certain of that. "The science is solid. Just keep doing the work." "What about Neurovance XR?" he asked in a hushed voice. "It's your baby." I carefully placed my framed doctoral diploma in a box. "I'm sure Caleb has plans for it." As I carried the last box to my car, I passed Caleb showing someone around. My replacement, presumably. They were laughing. I nodded politely and continued walking. At home, I sat in my kitchen, staring at the boxes. 15 years. Gone. I allowed myself exactly 1 glass of wine and 30 minutes of self-pity before calling Victoria. "It happened," I said simply. "I'm sorry, Claudia," she replied. "What's the severance?" "Insulting. 12 weeks. Ma," Victoria made a disapproving sound. "Did you sign anything?" "Not yet. They want me to come in tomorrow to finalize." "Don't sign until I review it," she said firmly. "And don't mention the patent filing. The USPTO hasn't published it yet, so Nexora doesn't know." The next day, I met with Human Resources. The severance agreement included a comprehensive non-compete clause that would prevent me from working in neuropharmacology for 2 years. There was also language requiring me to assign any relevant intellectual property to Nexora. "I'd like to take this home and review it," I said pleasantly. The HR director frowned. "Mr. Vance was hoping to wrap this up today." "I'm sure he was," I replied, maintaining my smile. "But given my 15 years of service, I think a day to review is reasonable." I forwarded the document to Victoria, who called me within an hour. "This is even worse than I thought," she said. "They're trying to claim rights to anything you might develop in the future that's even tangentially related to your work at Nexora." "Can they do that?" "They can try, but we have options. Our patent filing gives us leverage." 3 days later, I returned to Nexora with a counteroffer prepared by Victoria. The HR director took it with visible surprise. "I'll have to show this to Mr. Vance," she said. "Of course," I replied. "I'm happy to wait." 20 minutes later, I was ushered into Caleb's office. He wasn't smiling now. "This is highly irregular," he said, waving my counteroffer. "You're asking for significantly more severance and retention of certain intellectual property rights." "I believe it's fair compensation for my contributions," I said calmly. Caleb leaned forward. "You developed Neurovance while employed here. Any derivatives or improvements belong to Nexora." "That's a complex legal question," I replied. "My contract has specific language about work done during company time using company resources." His eyes narrowed. "What are you implying?" "Nothing. Just that I've kept meticulous records of my work, when and where it was performed." Caleb's jaw tightened. "We can fight this, you know. Our legal team would spend more on litigation than the additional severance I'm requesting." I finished for him. "And that's assuming you win." After a tense silence, Caleb pushed my counteroffer aside. "I'll need to discuss this with the board. In the meantime, we're proceeding with our plans for Neurovance XR. The announcement goes out next week." I kept my expression neutral. "That sounds exciting." As I left Nexora for what I thought might be the last time, I felt strangely calm. The game was in motion. In just a few days, they would announce Neurovance XR as their next blockbuster drug, and shortly after, they would discover who actually owned the patent. The press release went out on a Tuesday morning. Nexora Therapeutics announces breakthrough. Extended release depression treatment, Neurovance XR, expected to double company revenue by 2026. The stock jumped 12% that day. Financial analysts upgraded their recommendations. Business News shows featured glowing reports about Nexora's innovation pipeline and Caleb's visionary leadership. No one mentioned that the scientist behind the breakthrough had been let go. I watched it all from my home office, feeling oddly detached. Victoria called around noon. "Have you seen the announcement?" she asked. "Yes," I replied, very enthusiastic. "They're claiming they own the IP," Victoria said, "and the USPTO will be publishing patent applications on Thursday." "Including mine?" "Yes, and since yours was filed first, it will be clear who has priority." "What happens then?" I asked, though we'd been over this scenario multiple times. "One of two things," Victoria explained patiently. "Either they realize the situation and approach us to negotiate, or they try to fight it and claim you stole company IP. Which do you think it will be? With someone like Caleb Vance, he'll fight. His ego won't allow anything else." She was right. The day after the USPTO published the patent applications, revealing that Claudia Benson, not Nexora Therapeutics, had filed first for Neurovance XR, my phone exploded with calls. I ignored them all except Victoria's. "It's happening," she said. "Nexora's stock dropped 24% today. They've issued a statement claiming you misappropriated company intellectual property." "As expected," I replied. "There's more," Victoria continued. "I've received calls from 3 different pharmaceutical companies wanting to discuss licensing Neurovance XR from you. That I hadn't expected so quickly." "Already? Who?" "Verdanta Pharmaceuticals, Meridian Healthcare, and Terrigen Biotech. All major players, all offering terms that would make you very wealthy." I took a deep breath. "Let's not rush into anything. What's happening with Nexora?" "Their board has called an emergency meeting. Word is that Caleb is in the hot seat." I felt a twinge of satisfaction, but pushed it aside. This wasn't about revenge. It was about fairness, about being valued properly for my work. Later that afternoon, I received a different kind of call, from Howard Jameson, Nexora's founder and former CEO. "Claudia," he said, his voice warm despite the circumstances. "This is quite a situation." "Howard," I replied, genuinely pleased to hear from him. "I'm sorry it's come to this." "Are you?" There was no accusation in his tone, just curiosity. I considered the question. "I'm sorry it was necessary. I gave everything to Nexora for 15 years. I just wanted my work to be respected and protected." Howard was quiet for a moment. "The board has asked me to reach out unofficially, to see if there's a path forward." "There's always a path," I said, "but it won't look like what Caleb offered me." "Caleb may not be in the picture much longer," Howard said carefully. "His position is precarious." I'm not surprised. "What would it take, Claudia, to bring you and Neurovance XR back to Nexora?" I'd thought about this moment, prepared for it. Board representation, a significant equity stake, and leadership of an autonomous research division with guaranteed funding for 5 years. Howard whistled softly. "You're not asking for small things." "Neurovance XR isn't a small drug," I replied. "And I'm not the same person who was dismissed from a conference room last month." "No," Howard agreed. "You're certainly not. I'll take this back to the board. What's left of it after today. We'll be in touch." As I hung up, my phone signaled another call, from James, my former senior researcher at Nexora. "The office is in complete chaos," he said without preamble. "Caleb's been escorted out. People are saying you own the patent to Neurovance XR. Is it true?" "It's complicated," I replied. "Not to us," James said. "The entire research team is cheering for you. Whatever happens next, we're with you." That meant more than any stock price drop or licensing offer. The following days unfolded like a carefully orchestrated symphony. Nexora's board placed Caleb on administrative leave pending review. Corporate speak for, he's finished. The stock continued to fall as investors questioned the company's future without its next blockbuster drug. Financial news sites ran headlines like, patent blunder costs Nexora billions, and how one scientist outmaneuvered Big Pharma. I avoided the spotlight, declining interview requests and staying away from social media. This wasn't about public vindication, it was about establishing my worth. Meanwhile, the offers from other pharmaceutical companies grew more attractive. Verdanta's CEO personally called to offer not just a licensing deal, but a position as their chief scientific officer with complete autonomy over a new neuroscience division. We value innovation and the people behind it, he said. What happened at Nexora won't happen here. It was tempting. Very tempting. Then came the official call from Nexora's board chair, Eleanor Fitzgerald. Dr. Benson, she began formally, the board would like to meet with you and your legal representation to discuss a resolution to our current situation. I appreciate that, I replied. When? Tomorrow, if possible. This matter requires urgent attention. Victoria and I prepared carefully, anticipating every possible scenario. When we arrived at Nexora's headquarters the next morning, the atmosphere was noticeably different. Gone was the bravado, the dismissive attitude. Now there was deference, perhaps even a hint of fear. Eleanor led us into the boardroom where 8 people waited, the remaining board members and Howard Jameson, who had returned as interim CEO. Dr. Benson, Eleanor began, we find ourselves in an unprecedented situation. The board believes there's been a significant error in judgment regarding your departure and the handling of the Neurovance XR patent. I nodded, but remained silent. We would like to propose a resolution that recognizes your contributions and secures Neurovance XR's future with Nexora. Victoria and I listened as they outlined their offer. Reinstatement as Executive Vice President of Research and Development, a seat on the board, equity compensation, and a substantial signing bonus. In return, I would transfer the patent rights to Nexora. When they finished, I glanced at Victoria, who gave a subtle nod. Your offer shows you now understand my value, I said. But it doesn't address the fundamental issues that led us here. I need guarantees of research autonomy and protection from future changes in leadership perspective. What followed was 3 hours of intense negotiation. By the end, we had crafted an agreement that satisfied all parties. I would return to Nexora with expanded authority, a significant equity stake, and ironclad protections for my research team. The patent for Neurovance XR would be transferred to Nexora, but with favorable royalty terms for me personally. As we prepared to leave, Howard pulled me aside. You outplayed us all, Claudia, he said with a mixture of admiration and regret. I'm sorry it came to this. I'm not, I replied honestly. Sometimes we need to be reminded of our worth. I returned to Nexora the following Monday. As I walked through the research division, my team greeted me with genuine smiles and visible relief. James had organized a small welcome back gathering in the main lab. We knew you'd find a way back, he said, handing me a coffee mug with "The Queen Returns" printed on it. I laughed. Not a queen, just a scientist who learned to value herself, and taught a few corporate types a valuable lesson in the process, James added. As I settled back into my office, a much larger one now with a view of the Long Island Sound, I reflected on the journey. I hadn't sought revenge, but I had found justice. And in the process, transformed not just my career, but potentially how researchers like me would be treated throughout the industry. Sometimes the most powerful response to disrespect isn't anger or vengeance. It's simply claiming your true value and letting the consequences unfold naturally. 1 year later, Nexora Therapeutics held a launch party for Neurovance XR, which had received FDA approval in record time. The grand ballroom of the Stamford Plaza Hotel was filled with executives, scientists, investors, and medical professionals, all celebrating what analysts were already calling the pharmaceutical success story of the decade. I stood on the small stage, having just delivered remarks about the scientific journey behind the drug. The applause was genuine and sustained. As I stepped away from the podium, Howard, now permanently reinstated as CEO, took my place. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "none of this would have been possible without Dr. Claudia Benson. Her scientific brilliance created Neurovance, and her, let's call it strategic foresight, ensured that Neurovance XR would transform millions of lives while keeping Nexora at the forefront of neurological treatment." The crowd laughed knowingly. The story of my patent maneuver had become something of a legend in pharmaceutical circles, a cautionary tale for executives and an inspiration for researchers. Howard continued, "The board has unanimously voted to create the Benson Neuroscience Institute, a new division within Nexora dedicated to groundbreaking research, with complete scientific autonomy and guaranteed funding for the next decade." This announcement was met with even more enthusiastic applause. I hadn't known about this. It went beyond our negotiated agreement. As Howard beckoned me back to the stage, I felt a surge of emotion I hadn't expected. "The Institute will be housed in a new research facility," Howard said, "located right here in Stamford. And of course, Claudia will serve as its director, with full board support." As we raised our glasses in a toast, I caught sight of a familiar face near the back of the room. Caleb Vance, now working for a much smaller pharmaceutical company in a reduced role, watched the proceedings with a tight expression. Our eyes met briefly before he looked away. I felt no satisfaction in his downfall, only appreciation for the journey that had brought me here. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about destroying others, but about building something better from the ashes of what was lost. The Benson Neuroscience Institute became operational 6 months later. The building itself was a marvel of modern architecture, all glass and light, designed to foster collaboration and creativity. My team had expanded from 12 researchers to 40, with the brightest minds in neuropharmacology eager to join what industry publications were calling the most innovative research environment in biotech. On opening day, Eleanor Fitzgerald joined me for a tour of the facilities. "You've created something remarkable here, Claudia," she said as we walked through the main laboratory. "Something that will outlast all of us." "We created it," I corrected her. "It took losing everything to make this possible." Eleanor nodded thoughtfully. "The board has learned its lesson. Value isn't just in quarterly reports and stock prices. It's in the people who do the actual work." "I hope that lesson sticks," I said. "It will." Eleanor smiled. "Especially since you now own enough Nexora stock to make sure of it." That was true. My equity stake, negotiated during my return, had grown substantially as Neurovance XR exceeded even the most optimistic projections. I was now one of the largest individual shareholders, with influence that extended far beyond my scientific role. The pharmaceutical industry had taken notice. In the past year, several major companies had revised their policies regarding researcher recognition and compensation. 2 had even appointed scientists to their boards. The message was clear. Talent needed to be respected, not just employed. As for Caleb Vance, I heard he'd left the industry entirely. According to James, who maintained an extensive network of industry contacts, Caleb had tried to position himself as the victim of circumstances at Nexora, but his reputation never recovered. Going in a different direction had indeed been the right move, just not in the way he had intended. The direction was mine to determine now, guided by science and innovation rather than ego and short-term thinking. The future held possibilities I couldn't have imagined during those dark days after my dismissal. The irony wasn't lost on me that losing my position had ultimately led to gaining more control than I ever thought possible. The patent that had seemed like a desperate insurance policy became the cornerstone of a transformed career and company. Looking back on my journey from dismissed researcher to institute director and board member, I realized that the most effective revenge isn't found in destruction, but in building something so undeniably valuable that those who discarded you must acknowledge their mistake.